Now, let us begin the last session of the day. I am Jia Kim, a journalist and news anchor for TV Chosun. It's my great honor to moderate this topic at this time of the period of time. And the topic of our session is the new, the young, and the leadership for change. Since we have 6 people on stage and we only have 60 minutes, so let me start right away and first introduce our panels briefly. We have 6 distinguished speakers here with us today. First, Mike Bishop, a former U.S. representative for Michigan, and Brian Baird, a former U.S. representative for Washington, and Thomas Lembong, a former chairman of Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board, and Cho Jung-hoon, the president of the Transition Korea, and former Jae-young, a former member of the National Assembly, and Choi Ji-eun, international spokesperson for the Democratic Party. And just to give a brief background for the viewers, traditionally, the youth of Korea faced difficulty in political participation. Recently, however, a new group of young politicians is starting to make big waves in Korean politics. To give some example, recently, Lee Jun-seok, a 36-year-old politician, was elected to the major conservative party's new leader, becoming the youngest ever leader of the mainstream party in modern South Korean politics. And whether one agrees or not, his arrival encouraged other parties to search for young, influential politicians. And please feel free to join the talks between, whenever I ask questions, you guys can just raise your hand and join. It's kind of freestyle talking discussion. So first, giving this background, I would like to first ask Mr. Cho Jung-hoon why this Lee Jun-seok phenomenon, we call it, is happening in Korean politics, and what do you think this has caused the younger generation to become more involved in Korean politics scene?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting this wonderful conference. It's a great privilege to be part of it. Good question. I think I have 2 answers for that question. First, probably better to start with their sense of disappointment among young generations in Korea over the Korean politics and in more generally speaking over Korean society. And the emergence of Lee Jun-seok is not too surprising given that their voice and their perspective and their demand have not been considered seriously, seriously in the normal process of Korean decision-making process, including politics. For those, it was very interesting. It is generally known that youth, the young, or young generations, whatever we call it, are generally less interested in politics for many reasons. And I asked them question, do you know that Lee Jun-seok was elected as the chair of the party? And for those who have no interest in politics, even them, it was good news and big news for them. So I think this is meaningful change or signal that young generation would no longer be silent, remain voiceless. They will start to raise their voice and express their opinions, especially with their votes. Perspective-wise, what will be the prognosis of this interesting syndrome? I think it depends on 2 things. I do not think our society needs a hero anymore. A politician with outstanding background or history doesn't necessarily guarantee that he will be the best problem solver. He and young generation political leaders have a homework to prove themselves as competent and able policymakers and change makers. I think our society is generally very quick in bringing up new players into the ring, probably more than any other societies I have known. But it is also our society also very quick to bring that person down from that ring if that person doesn't deliver. So I think we have given young generation a second chance of opportunity. The first was 19th session of National Assembly, 19대 국회, when Kim Kwang-jin and Jang Ha-na become members of National Assembly years back. It's not difficult to assess that experiment didn't really produce meaningful result in terms of changing Korean politics perspective. So this is a second change and wave of young generation running into politics deeply, and I do hope that he will be more successful and this generation will be more successful, but homework is still there. Let me stop here.
And we'll come back to the Korean politics scene later again, and I would like to actually talk about the politics in the United States, and I would like to ask this question to Mr. Bishop and Baird, to both. And first, actually this is like, in the US politics, this kind of young youth politic participation is not very new thing, because there's like youngest president with age of 43, John F. Kennedy was elected in 1960. And today we also see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's like the youngest female congresswoman in American history. And I was also surprised when I just found out that she's the second most interactive politician on Twitter, right behind Donald Trump. And
it's a low bar.
Yeah. And how and why do you think these young politicians in US, they are actually really influential and they have power in their voice? And what caused like this successful?
Well, I think you made first of all, I want to thank the Asian Leadership Conference. I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here. This has been a fantastic experience, and what a wonderful way to end the whole conference then with the youth of this organization, and to talk about ways to participate. In the United States, the participation by the younger generation, I think, is driven lately, most recently, by social media and the trend towards social media platforms. It is so easy to get connected with other people and other organizations and other groups and other movements and join it instantaneously. Ocasio-Cortez and some of the others that are younger that have joined Congress, that have been elected to Congress, are, I think, products of that environment. And we're seeing a lot of that in the United States. We're also feeling a sense by our younger generation that our older generation is kind of messing things up lately. So they want to get involved. They want to be a part of their future. They know that if they step back and let someone else make the decisions for them, those politicians are not necessarily very credible in that category. So they want to be involved, and they're getting more involved. The United States is a country that I think is transitioning right now from an older driven, a leadership driven by the elder statesmen, to a younger generation who have new ideas about the direction of the country. And so we're seeing a very strong push forward by the younger generation. I think it's a good thing just to participate. And what we're trying to do with the younger generation now is to not participate in the political process like they participate on social media. This should be a very civil process of open dialogue, of critical thinking. And we want a civil system going forward, that we can all talk to each other. Republicans, Democrats, independents can talk to each other in a way that's consistent with the way our founding fathers debated issues and discussed topics over the years. And this is the way that we move forward in our country in a productive way, and not tear each other down all the time. And if I can say anything to this group today, the most important thing that you can do as a younger generation is learn to critically think about issues. Learn to be able to discuss and debate issues in a way that is civil, respectful. And, you know, there's this ancient Confucian theory that the elder spokesmen are the ones that are supposed to lead. You're supposed to be older to lead. Well, that's because people that are older, generally speaking, have been through all this and have learned to just speak in a way and to be respectful of each other. But I think this generation gets it. I think you understand how to get involved and how to be a productive part of the future of your country. And I feel the energy from a crowd like this, and I feel the energy in Korea, in the entire country, of the younger generation coming up and being a part of the future of this great country.
And Mr. Baird, do you have opinions about?
Yes, thank you. 안녕하세요. It's so nice to be here and see so many young faces engaged in politics. A couple of thoughts. First of all, in the most recent US election, young people had an enormous impact. And I believe they did because their future is at stake. The future of the planet when it comes to climate change. A future of will we be a tolerant society that tries to combat racism and hatred and negative forces. A future where the world is at peace. A future where there's economic opportunity for young people. All of those factors mobilized young people across the country. And as Mike said, they were using social media in new ways. They were rising up to support candidates, to become candidates. And especially I want to say it's so exciting to see so many young women in this meeting today and getting more involved in politics in Korea, in elective office, and in a number of other ways. Sadly, still in our country, I believe in our Congress, the leadership is far too old. I have joked sometimes that we need to lower the voting age at both ends. And by that I mean in our country you can vote when you're 18, but maybe we should lower it to 16 and there should be an age beyond which you can't vote anymore. Now my apologies to the older folks, but to be honest, it's your future. So you should have more say in your future. And if you look at where we spend our money in our country and almost every other country, social programs, they go predominantly to the very elderly instead of to the new generations where I think the greatest need is. Now, we have some great exceptions to that, and elder statesmen have much to offer. But my point is not that we should take away their right to vote, that would be crazy, but we should do more to empower young people. And if I can just share just two bits of wisdom, if I may, for those of you who are contemplating service in office. The first is that the single most important ingredient for a democratic society to succeed is a spirit of service over self. Elections are important, constitutions are important, but if the people who are elected are not elected with a fundamental motive to serve their country and their people, then democracy can just be another way of gaining power and abusing power. The second really important lesson, and it's a difficult and sometimes painful one, is in order to deserve to be in elective office, you have to be willing to lose the office. Meaning you have to sometimes take difficult positions that upset your own party leadership, that upsets your base, that upsets the media, but if you believe in your heart and you have studied something in detail, even if it's not easy, you sometimes have to take that position. Young people are often fearless. They are driven by this sense of service, of something greater than themselves, of the future, and they're not afraid to ask hard questions. And that's why it's so exciting to see you all here and to see the numbers of young people, average young people, pop stars, all sorts of people stepping up to make a difference. Stay fearless.
And actually, talking about the social media, in Korea, social media it's also a big thing. And I know social media cannot be, as Mr. Bishop said, could not be a platform to discuss things in civil way. And many politicians in Korea everyone's doing Facebook and Twitter and everything. And I want to ask Lee Jae-young, how do you think about it? Like social media participation of politicians, and what's the pros and cons? How do you think about it?
Well, I think if you look at the result of our, the Lee Jun-suk becoming the chairperson of our party, the social media, the way we disseminate and consume political message, has completely changed this time, especially during the COVID era, where everybody, at least in the political sector, where before traditionally gathering and face-to-face engagement was very important. Now, I think the general population feels much comfortable now getting those messages through their social media, which Lee Jun-seok used it completely to his own advantage and used it very well and effectively to win the party election. So I believe the social media, although I think it started way early in the United States and the Western Hemisphere, is just catching up in Korea. And because of that reason, because of the way we now conduct the election, and although it is our own little party, well, it's not a little party, it's a big party, but this party, the way we ran the election this time will, I think, become the mega trend of Korea moving forward, even everything becomes normal. So obviously, because young generation is more social or technology savvy, that it's easier for them to now participate in politics and getting the message the way that they didn't or couldn't before. So I think it is a mega trend that will settle. But I think for young generation to become more active in politics, we do have to change some aspects of our system, which is, Mr. Bishop said, lowering the age, the voting age. We actually lowered it to 18 last time. So we just lowered to 18, but lowering to 16 or even younger, who knows? But I think that makes sense. But even before that, we also prohibit young generation, such as a junior high school or even younger, to participate in political party in Korea. Is prohibited by law. I think that needs to be changed. Because if you're going back to Lee Jun-seok again, we think it's just a new young generation taking the party leadership. But if you look at his past, he's been in politics for 10 years. He started in 2012, and he started at a pretty high level within my party. And throughout the years, he continuously put himself out there for elections. He was most sought after political commentator on TVs, and he took a lot of junior leadership within the party. So the way he participated in my party for 10 years gave him a very experienced and well-seasoned politician. We haven't been able to give that platform to young generation in general. I think our system needs to change where we can, as systemic-wise, to accept and call all these young generation to participate very freely and actively. I think that's our next homework.
And talking about the social media, I would also like to ask Mr. Tom Lembong about how's the social media working in Indonesia politics, and also before that, I want to hear about the politics in Indonesia, because in Western countries like JF Kennedy or former UK Prime Minister Cameron or President Macron are great examples of young leaders. However, in Eastern countries, it's not as common phenomenon that's happening. And however, it seems like Indonesia is really undergoing big changes, and it has already started because president was elected at really young age, and also I see like mayor electoral election, there's like 20s and 30s, and it's like I see many upcoming young politicians. So I found out that more than half of the population is younger than 40 in Indonesia. And does that affect this? And also, first, can you mention the social media, how the environment?
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Well, first I want to join my fellow panelists in conveying my deepest gratitude for including me in this closing panel at the conclusion of what has been yet another wonderful and successful Asian Leadership Conference. I want to congratulate the organizers for this amazing achievement of getting this together under extremely challenging pandemic circumstances. Now, turning to the political revolution in Indonesia, definitely the main icon of this political revolution is our current president, President Jokowi. who really came out of nowhere as the mayor of a medium-sized city in the province of Central Java. And this emergence of unknown outsider from outside the system would only be possible in an electoral democracy. Now, admittedly, he was an incredibly savvy user of social media as well. Like, social media strategies played a big role, and even today continue to play a very big role in how he attracts followers, manages his base, and so on. And that social media savvy has been copied by subsequent generations of candidates at all levels of government. For better and for worse, it's becoming a little bit out of control. It's becoming a little bit too focused on management of perception and image creation. And it's degenerating a little bit into turning politics into entertainment. You know, we're starting to drift more and more towards humor and you know, excitement, and starting to drift away from the substance, you know, of the issues. So that's maybe one potential downside of sort of a social media-driven politics, where obviously the young people are the savviest in you know, utilizing social media. But I want to draw attention to a couple of things, right? First, I think is the importance of breakthrough entry into politics by outsiders. So it's not only the young people, but I think if you can have more and more non-traditional backgrounds of people coming into politics, coming into government, right? So one small example of this is President Jokowi in 2015 appointing me to become trade minister, right? So I don't come from a political background. I'm also an outsider. I'm not a bureaucrat, but it worked wonderfully, right? And I think he brought many people from outside the system into the system, and it completely shook up the system, right? So I think my fellow panelists have, you know, covered this a little bit, that systems have a tendency to become hidebound, you know, become a bit incestuous and stale, and actually injecting fresh blood from completely unexpected or untraditional backgrounds, I think is going to be really important. Second of all, I really want to draw our attention back to the theme of this year's ALC, which is rebuilding trust and rebuilding collaboration, but particularly the trust part, right? So if I look back at the last 20 years and the slide downward in civility and the increase in polarization and the emergence of heated rhetoric and so on, and why are growing segments of society increasingly voting in favor of extreme parties, right? Or, you know, becoming more polarized. Personally, I see at the root of that a high degree of disappointment with all of us on all sides of the aisle, right? Whether we're progressive, liberal, or conservative, and so on, we somehow managed to lose the public's trust, right? We've become detached from their real life, day-to-day concerns, right? And become incestuous, even our style, right? So it's funny, when I was in cabinet, and I used to go to like G20 summits and so on, right? And then sometimes like a fellow minister from another country and I would like jointly address the media and so on, and I would be sort of taken aback. My colleagues like suddenly in front of the cameras, he or she will totally change, you know? Like their tone, their posture, the way they talk. And after that, say, Steve, Like, that's not how you talk to your wife. That's not how you talk to me, right? What happened? Like, why suddenly, when you're in front of the cameras, your style, the way you talk totally changes, right? And I think one thing with the young people, you know, and pardon my language, I think they're the most sophisticated generation in human history, right? They're the most exposed, you know, thanks to the globalized social media platforms, YouTube, everything. They see everything around the world. So they have very strong, what I call bullshit detector, right? So their antenna are exquisitely sensitive. If you're not really authentic, if you're not really sincere, you're finished, right? So I think my hope as more and more young people come in, as more and more outsiders come in, as you know, social media plays a bigger role and as that continues to evolve, I really hope we can become more authentic, more sincere, more genuine, because I think that matters for earning back the public's trust, right? You know, why people are voting for extreme measures like Brexit, you know, for extreme outsiders like President Trump. I think they're just fed up. They're so fed up. And I think it has to do with how we've become so detached, you know, how we've become like a cabal of our own, traveling from summit to summit. We're spending too much time with each other and not enough time with the people we're representing. You know, and we're you know, obsessed with narrow issues that we think are important, but neglecting the day-to-day livelihood issues that actually matter to the people that we're supposed to be serving. So I think regaining the trust and you know, building back that authenticity, that sincerity, right? I think that's a real opportunity right now.
I think Lee Jun-seok case is also one example of people young youth feeling tired up and fed up with the original traditional politicians. And also, because you mentioned outsiders, we also have President Lee Myung-bak, who has the background from about the businessman background. And I want to ask you another question. Since you walked through a successful business career and you became Minister of Trade, and I also see many young politicians coming from business career background in Indonesia. And I would like to ask why they're trying to jump into the politics, giving up their original career, even though they're young. Why is that happening?
Well, I guess the motivations can be very mixed. And happily, there's plenty of young people from successful business background who are settled enough, you know, have enough money that they can dedicate themselves to the country and serve the country without having to worry about money. Unfortunately, there's, you know, like many third world countries, we have a corruption problem. And a lot of people go into politics, frankly, to make money, which is very unfortunate, and I've got to be very blunt about that reality, right? But, you know, I just want to take this occasion to share a little joke, which is a very astute person one time observed to me, did you notice that all the politicians in the USA are lawyers? Like, they all come from legal background. You know, President Obama, President Clinton, right? And many members of Congress and so on. In China, all the political leaders are engineers, right? They all have engineering degrees, right? For better or for worse, the trend right now in Indonesia is definitely a lot of politicians and members of parliament come from business background, right? So again, I think each trend will have its positives and its negatives. Is it better to have lawyers? Is it better to have engineers? Or is it better to have businessmen, you know, business people by background? You know, I think they each carry their upsides and downsides.
Yeah.
Just want to chip in. I don't know. Does politician need a background? Do we need to have a certain background to be a politician or statesman? I want to break it. Diversity of background in politics certainly help. right? Because background influence people's thinking process and the way they behave and decide. So I hope certainly no one country's Congress fully consists of lawyers. That would be a bad thing. But as we talk about the youth and the young coming into politics, by definition, they will have little background. If you insist the young generation must have a brilliant background, that's a little bit conflicting. I think we should be ready to open and accept young leaders with little background. Why not? I think the benefit and beauty of young leaders is they are aspirational, not necessarily based on years or decades of experience. They have an idea they want to prove, not yet proven, but want to prove. So I think they are challenger. So this is one of the things, as I started my political career a year back, almost no interview is conducted without asking my background. And I felt it's understandable to ask your background, but what about my plan, my vision, and my policies? And I think this is one of the main reasons why the politics in Korea have such a high hurdle for young to enter. As we all say in word that we want the youth and the young to come and play a bigger role in politics. At the same time, we want brilliant CV, which is difficult to get. So I think we want to change this perception.
Actually, I think there's also a cultural thing. In Korea, in Asia, including Korea, there's a culture to respect and follow the elders. And a lot of this is influenced by Confucian practices and beliefs that value age as well as more legal obstacles. And because of this, older generations naturally take control of decision making in politics, and it's hard for actually young generations to have speak out and influence in politics. And I would like to ask this question to Ms. Choi Ji-eun, and because you decided to jump into the politics when you were young, and first I want to ask you why and how you got into politics, and what were the obstacles in speaking out or in the party? How was it? And
well, I'm 40 years old. Because age is so important in Korea, I should reveal the information. I don't think I'm young, but since I came to politics, everybody thinks you are the youngest, and you are so young, or you are too young. So I'm fed up with the ageism of my country, actually. But yes, I was working as a senior economist at the World Bank, based in Washington, D.C., and I have been advising the policymaker in different countries on the economic policy issue, and I have been a professional experience about 16 years, and I never thought that I would be a politician one day coming back to Korea. But my current ruling party, the Democratic Party, just called me and asked if I can join the party. I was initially hesitating, but I thought that's a duty that I have to do if my country need me, someone like myself, and I felt that I have to serve for country. So that's how I quit the World Bank and coming back to the Korea. So my entry route in politics has been a bumpy ride. I ran for a seat last year in Busan constituency, and I lost, but by a small margin. And since then, I have been working in a number of issues within the party and also advising the government, while also working as a visiting professor in SNU. But as we all discussed today, I cannot agree more with the other panelists that the emergence of young politicians is a global phenomenon. It's not only in Korea. I think the high unemployment and also the growing inequality could be the root causes of this issue. So young people are unhappy with the situation, and they are looking for the politicians. They can better represent them. So I think unless we address this fundamental problem of the society, I think this trend of having more younger politicians would continue. But the problem is that this situation is particularly crucial here in Korea, as moderator mentioned, where we have Confucianism as a cultural background, and the gerontocracy seems to be widely accepted. So when if we see the current administration, our Blue House, the average age of the senior official is 54 years old, which is 7 years older than a previous administration, such as Nomuyon administration. And when you appoint some government official, I agree with also Jung-hoon that we don't really need to see the background, but I think the worst is just looking at the age. So I prefer they looking at the people's merits, such as their skills or their abilities, expertise, or the years of experience, than just age. So a lot of things need to be changed, and I think the current ruling party and the Blue House knows about it, and they are working towards to make such a change. However, this kind of change will not be happen just by appointing 1 or 2 young people in the senior official. I think we need to change it systematically and institutionally to support young and new politicians to enter into the politics. So, for instance, the lowering the budget or the expenses related to election could be one example. And also creating a path for young people to enter into politics and then be involved in the party politics, even starting from the teenagers and young age, could be another way. But I think the more important thing is creating the culture and shifting our culture to value the representation of the leadership. So Korean leadership has been very old. It does not represent our population or our people. So having more diverse and inclusive leadership in the Korean society, not only in politics, but also society in general, is the fundamental solution that we need to achieve. And I think there's still a long way to go. But I'm very hopeful today that a lot of people are interested in young politicians, and they are asking, how is it like to be a young politician? And I think these are like great movement, and I hope that we can make some change.
Do you see yourself as a non-traditional or traditional?
In what way?
As a generation, just, yeah.
I feel like I'm something in between. I was born in 1980, so I'm probably the oldest among the millennials. But if we see the Korean politics, a lot of senior officials are born like around the 1960s. And now a lot of young people are upset with these older generations, and they are usually born 1990s. So something like people born in 1970s and 1980s, we do not have much representation in politics, but we also do not have many players in politics or society in general. So I think making more representation of the different generation is very important. So I'm including myself. A lot of young politicians are not asking for change of generation. We are asking for coexistence of the generation. So not only young people, but also older people need to be in the party leadership or the society leadership.
And also, I would like to point out that these days, Democratic Party of Korea and Blue House, as you said, are also taking an unconventional approach to the younger generation's desire to participate in politics. Also, this, I think it is happening because of Lee Jun-suk phenomenon also. And there are criticism that Democratic Party of Korea is enforcing one voice policy within the party, and there are also complaints from, as you saw from the articles, like some newly joined members who does not agree, they're young politicians, and they don't agree with the one voice policy that's happening. And I'm sure you can see this kind of incidences happening not only in the Democratic Party, also in everywhere in Korea, the politics. And what may be the advantage of the younger politicians and that elder politicians don't have?
Well, I think one, maybe two advantages of the younger politician, especially like myself, a newcomer. First, we don't have much relationship with the other politicians, so I don't owe anything to other people, so I don't have to work for them. I'm free to say whatever I want to say. And second, I don't know what happened before, so I'm allowed to make a mistake. I think these two are the advantage of being not only young politician, but also being new politicians, newcomers.
Actually, Mr. Lee, can I ask you how you think about this phenomenon?
Which phenomenon?
That's happening.
Lee
Enforcing one voice policy.
One voice policy. Well, I think ideologically, we are together, we form the party because we agree on certain value. So we do value one voice on certain things, obviously. Excuse me. Excuse me. But if you look at the, sorry. But if you look at my party, which is a very big party, it's hard to have just one voice because we do have just many people. So diversity within my party is already there. What's new about Lee Jun-seok is that, you know, it's a young politician, you know, it's a great message, but it was more of a symbol that public demanded towards our politics in general. It's just not conservative side. It's a message for all politicians. So it's a message against establishment. It's the expression of public saying that we're not very happy with establishment and the old faces, so, or revolving doors, whatever you might call it. They're just fed up. So Lee Jun-seok's young, like, you know, what Ms. Choi said, who doesn't have much of, you know, debt to old establishment. They just want to see the new things happening. I just hope that this doesn't remain as an accident. This needs to be carried on. And obviously, it's a heavy burden on Lee Jun-seok to make sure that his election, or at least opening up the platform for the younger generation, like I said before, becomes a part of the system, part of the new tradition, right? So one voice, yeah, again, going back to that question, I think it is important on certain issues, obviously, but I think diversity is already there, and we definitely have showed to the world that our party is, or at least ready to move on with lots of different voices.
And also, I would like to ask Mike Bishop, even though young and old generation has lived a different period of time, of course, and they have to make the progress in order to go step forward. And what do you think of it as the best approach for different generations to work together? I actually want to ask this to all the panels, so could you start?
Okay, so don't talk long. The best way to do that is to share, to build bridges over issues that are common to everyone. All of elected officials come to their elected environment with usually with an issue that's important to them, maybe a couple of issues. When you get to elected government, you will be confronted by others who have different issues that they want to talk about and move forward. So it's incumbent upon all elected officials to be able to build relationships with the other members, regardless of their age, sex, race, whatever. Very diverse issues, very diverse perspectives, and it's just important to make sure that when you go into elected office, you build those relationships so when the issues come up, you're able to discuss them in a civil, productive way. And I think that's another attribute of the younger generation is the ability to be more social, and that's a key function in this process, to be able to be social and communicate with people.
Tom, could you?
So I guess as I reflect back on my time in cabinet, and at that time I was considered an extremely young minister also. I think, you know, one thing that I really feel can be a secret weapon, a very powerful weapon, including in our intergenerational relations, because I had to interact with ministers who are much older than me, much more senior, right, and vice versa. Personally, I'm really huge on humility. I think if we're able to train ourselves and develop actual, genuine humility, that is a powerful way to create an atmosphere, as some of my fellow panelists have pointed out, of mutual respect, right? But it has to be real. You know, one thing in certainly Indonesian culture, maybe in other Asian cultures, is we act very humble. We bow and we, you know, fill our language with terms of politeness, right? But in reality, we can be quite arrogant, right? So real humility is about gladly, happily admitting mistakes and sharing, you know, what we learned from those mistakes, for example. It's admitting that, you know, that we're not right, that we're wrong, and why. Being very open about that. I think listening a lot, right? So I think when we think more and more about what is real humility, not just, you know, acted humility, but I found, you know, I always thought that one of President Jokowi's secret weapons was his humility, and he was for many years one of the best listeners I've ever met. You know, I mean, he meets so many people, and I have yet to remember in the first term, at least. You know, I'm no longer interacting as much with him in the second term. In the first term, I struggle to remember any meeting where he was not giving those people who are talking his full and undivided attention. And he's really an amazing listener. And even like 7 months later, he would say, yeah, you know, Minister Tom, you told me, right? Like 7 months ago, I was like, oh my God, you remember? Right? I mean, of the hundreds of people that you talked to, like you actually remembered, right? So the power of listening, which I think is a benefit if you're genuinely humble and open. So I find that to be really helpful, including in intergenerational relationships.
Yes, Mr.
The question is how old and young can live together. I want to be more provocative. Don't try to make peace with old generation. Don't try to, because they wouldn't. The tension, the conflict among generations, nothing new, nothing sudden. It has been there, it is here, it will be there. I think the history will move forward only when the young wins. I don't see much history, I don't know much history when old generation prevails over the youth voices. So I think try to win over the old generations in whatever ways you do. Coming back to politics, because I think given the time management, I think this is my last comment. One of the main comments I have for the young generation who consider political career is don't imitate. Don't try to imitate. The young generation political candidates try to imitate the senior politicians in many ways, the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they dress. You will never match with a senior politician if you follow that path. You have to find your own unique value. You have to present your own messages in your own way. Be bold, be crazy, be wild, why not? This is how you... In politics, I think there's no better advantage than being new. 신상. There is nothing more valuable than 신상 in politics. And you all are 신상. Why try to be old product? So my advice to young is don't try to imitate. Even the way party runs will have to change. One voice policy, heck with it. I don't follow that. In my party, even though I'm the representative, my opinion, 5 out of 10 overruled by my members. I'm very thrilled by this. And I'm late 40s in terms of my age. even late 40s, don't follow party line. Because we didn't live like that. I don't like hierarchical order. Young generation doesn't like even, they don't even follow order in terms of bureaucratic political line. So I really encourage you to be yourself, even when you enter politics. Don't imitate. And last piece, if you don't find yourself fit into politics, leave it. Get out of it. Because in old generations, every successful career ends with politics. That was mentality of old generation. Every successful career ends with politics. Not anymore. Not anymore. There are a lot more opportunities outside of politics. But if you want to come and try politics, whether it's fit for your career, be yourself, test few years, and if you find it fitting, continue and you will make good change in your society. If not, find some other careers. That's my real honest advice to you. Thank you.
And Mr. Lee?
I'm going to sound very boring after this comment. I think whether you're young or old, if you want to become a politician, I think sense of balance is very important. I think I agree with Chairman Cho about the background. You don't need a certain background to become a politician. But as a politician, because I believe politics is about mitigating when there is a heated discussions within our society, that you need to be ready to hear other side of the table. You need to in order to do that, you need to, although you are allowed to have your own ideology and opinion, obviously, that's how you become a politician in a way, but you need to definitely have a sense of balance and be ready to listen to the other side. And if you are willing to do that, I think all these clashes that we're talking about in between generation, I think that can be solved. As long as you approach any subject and topic with open mind, then I think there is a possibility of becoming a good politician. So yeah, be bold. I think be bold and trying new things is definitely something that we need in our society. But again, when it comes to politics, I do believe the sense of balance is a very important trait.
And Mr.?
Well, just coming from my short experience in politics, I think what makes it a good politician is the ability to reduce the gap between what I think is a good policy and what other people think is a good policy. So as an economist, I think sometimes maybe the best policy for market or like real estate market or job market would be A, but a lot of times my party implement the policy option which is B. So A and B is very different. But I'm learning that actually the role of the good politicians is reducing this gap and understanding what people really want and then make it work in the market. So that requires a lot of persuasive and communicational skills and also leadership skills. And I think a lot of young people, like especially those who are sitting in today's audience, grown up in the generation that we are learning those communication skills than other older generations. So I think you guys can be much better politicians than the older generation. And also in terms of the way of coexisting the different generations, I think the most direct way is you became a politician and you run for an office. But indirect way is you vote for the politicians who value the diversity and inclusion, not only in politics, but also the entire leadership of the country. So I think the people like here would perhaps implement your right to vote for right politicians in the upcoming election.
And Mr. Brian Baird?
Thank you. There are two dangers, I think, facing young people who want to become involved in politics. There are many. But one is cynicism. And cynicism is a word that means you just don't believe anything. Everything is false. Everyone is corrupt. All the political leaders are in it for themselves. No one really cares. Don't give in to that. It's too easy. And it's false. And it's dangerous. There are many good people from different parties, of different ideologies, and don't let anyone tell you that everyone is corrupt in politics, because it's not true. The other risk is that you'll come to believe you're the only one who is right, that the other side is wrong, always. And it becomes a battle of saying, they're bad, we are good, and instead it's better to approach disagreements and even agreements with respectful curiosity. I want to understand what your perspective is. I want to learn from that. The last two things I want to say, and I guess I get to probably almost
We have
close.
time, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is this. In Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, there's a very powerful painting, and it's George Washington, the commanding general, our first president, but he was not yet president in the painting. He has just won the war, and he's standing, handing a piece of paper to a bunch of seated men. Well, what he was doing was, as general, he was giving command of his army over to the civilians and saying, we won the war so that you can govern. That was revolutionary. Generals always said, I won, I'm in charge. He said, we'll have elections, it's the citizens who will decide. And so it should be for our generation, passing opportunity on to the young generation. And the last thing I want to say is we are here today because of an individual who believes that young people have an opportunity to contribute, but they'll need that opportunity, they'll need support, and they'll need experience, and they'll need comradeship. And the founder of this event is with us today, and I would like him to rise so that we can give him our appreciation, because he embodies a belief that young people deserve an opportunity and deserve support as they lead. Please stand so we can give you applause. Thank you for putting this marvelous conference together, for giving these young people the opportunity to learn, to work, to get to know another, and thanks to all these panelists for sharing their wisdom and insight. It's gratifying to look out on the future, to be next to the future, and to know it's very, very bright indeed. Thank you all for letting us participate.
Thank you. So there were opinions that people, that our panel said, be bold, be balanced, and don't try to imitate and find the real humility, but there's also opinions who's saying, listen to the elders also, listen to the experienced ones. So I guess there's many different opinions that came out today. And it was really good to talk about this. And regardless of what side of political aisle that one chooses to sit, and young generation will have to stand up and show that their voices really matter, and also find solution together with the elder generations. And I guess we have to wrap up because of the time limit. And now I'll just close the session due to time limit, and I will just discuss more. I would like to discuss more. We only had like 60 minutes and time flew, so. And I hope to see you guys maybe next year again in ALC. And thank you for sharing insightful thought with us, and thank you. Before we stand up, I have to close up the ALC event to our viewers online, so I'll just stand up here and kind of. So now this marks the end of the 12th Asian Leadership Conference, and we hope that we have provided deep insight and new strategies through our 2-day programs. And thank you once again. We hope to see you again next year. 네, 이것으로 제12회 아시안 리더십 컨퍼런스를 마치겠습니다. 이틀간 진행된 긴 여정에 함께 해주셔서 감사하고요. 저희는 내년에 다시 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다. 최우석 부장님.